Alright, let's talk about The Sword in the Stone. It's another Disney movie. This one is basically the story of King Arthur. Or it's not like the whole story of King Arthur, it's mostly just like the first book or chapter, if you will, where, focusing on him pulling the sword out of the stone and, before all that stuff with like the Holy Grail and and the knights who say "Nee," and and what other Monty Python jokes can I make? Anyway, I watched this. This is one of those Disney movies that I watched a lot as a kid. I remember, and yeah, I loved it a lot. Um, and yeah, I'd say it's still a very enjoyable little experience. Um, so yeah, the plot is, there's this boy named Arthur, but he has the nickname Wart. He's a page who has to, he's serving under some, I forget what the stepfather, his position is like a lord or something, and he has a 20-year-old son who is trying to become a knight, or he or yeah, he's knighted, and he's yeah, this whole stuff about the son trying to become king, but yeah, somewhere around somewhere down the road, Arthur ends up becoming king instead. Um, and yeah, he happens across Merlin one day, and Merlin the wizard, of course. And Merlin takes him in as like an apprentice, and kind of teaches him all these lessons about kind of like adapting to first he's a fish, and adapts to life under the sea. Under the sea. Okay, we're a couple decades off from that one. And then he becomes a squirrel, and while he's a squirrel, there's this cute but somewhat annoying girl squirrel who's hitting on him, and being a bit of a stalker. Let's be honest here. Um, I guess squirrels don't have the no means no culture we humans have taken on. Um, and yeah, later on he becomes a bird, and while he's a bird, he happens across this witch named Madame Mim, and yeah, ends up with the most famous scene in the movie, the wizard's duel, and yeah, then there's this whole plot, and yeah, of course it leads to Arthur pulling the sword out of the stone, the titular sword. Um, so yeah, it's the story doesn't feel like entirely complete. Like for instance, Madame Mim looks like she should have been like the villain of the movie. Like she should have been like the antagonist throughout, but she only has like this one brief segment kind of near the end of the movie. So as a result, like she's the biggest villain they deal with, but the official antagonist is basically the stepfather and his son. Um, but yeah, even they aren't like bad guys. They're kind of jerks, but yeah, they're sure not what you'd call villains, just kind of, but they are antagonists. Um, what else? Um, I will say the three best characters in the movie, hands down: Merlin, Archimedes, his pet owl, and Madame Mim. Like, all three of them are just great. Like, Mim, for like the brief time she's on screen, or relatively speaking, for the movie's runtime, yeah, she's a very entertaining villain, and yeah, that wizard's duel is like I've seen it like a million times, but yeah, it's still such a great scene. But yeah, Merlin's like a very entertaining, like kind of a crotchety old timer, but and he has all this knowledge about stuff in the future, so he kind of breaks the fourth wall in a way. As a matter of fact, you might say he's kind of like the precursor to the genie from Aladdin, who is kind of like the what's the word? Anachronism. So yeah, fourth wall breaking, anachronism spewing, kind of a comic relief character, but not officially. I guess Archimedes, the owl, is the official comic relief in this movie, and yeah, he's very entertaining as well. I guess the stepdad and his son are kind of entertaining as well. No, but yeah. Arthur's a decent. He's a decent protagonist. I mean, he's like the wide-eyed, yeah, the wide-eyed hopeful, if you will. He dreams of becoming like a squire and then a knight, but Merlin's kind of trying to steer him in a different direction. But he's meant to become the king, but Merlin wants him to focus more on like intelligence over brute strength, which is a decent little message to have overall. I mean, I still think strength can definitely be useful at times, but yeah. But yeah, I think intelligence is definitely a higher priority, I think. And yeah, I do like how often they kind of emphasize that, like, each time Arthur's transformed into an animal, he like has to deal with like another creature who's bigger than him, and so yeah, he uses his wits to defeat these tough beasts. And then during the bird segment, he has to. Well, Merlin has to deal with Mim, and there's kind of a similar theme with that, in that Mim is transforming into all these dangerous beasts, and she's chasing Merlin around, who's he's focusing more on turning into things that can kind of like evade these beasts. Like, for instance, Mim turns into an elephant, he turns into a mouse to scare her off, and stuff like that. But yeah, Merlin does still turn into like a crab and a goat, and he can use a little bit of strength when he turns into those things, but yeah, he still ultimately relies on wits over like the power that Mim's forms are taking, or that they have. I do think maybe they could have gone a little farther with the message. Maybe there could have been a little more like discussion about strength versus intelligence. But yeah, overall, I think it's a pretty decent message throughout. And yeah, there's it's just a very entertaining movie. That said, it's definitely not perfect. There are a lot of like technical issues throughout, like sometimes the animation doesn't seem complete. Sometimes there's like repeated animations, like twice you see Merlin like take off his hat, and he like has to slick his hair back real quick, and then he puts the hat back on and then looks at his watch. I'm pretty sure that happened twice in the movie. That's a pretty minor thing compared to 2 issues concerning Arthur. And yeah, both of them have to do with voice work slash audio. And one of them is like, okay, so Arthur is 12 years old, so they had, you know, they wanted to be like as authentic as they could, so they got like probably like a 12-year-old boy to voice act for the character. And the thing about being 12 years old is, you know, that's the age where your voice kind of goes through this weird phase, you know. Although not as weird as what you hear Arthur's voice going throughout the movie, like you know, one moment he'll sound like this prepubescent kid, and then the next moment he'll suddenly sound like a teenager. So yeah, it's like his testicles are dropping and then winding back up and then dropping again, and etc., etc. It's very distracting. I think it does finally settle to the teenage voice by the end, but yeah, you can tell throughout that, like, clearly they recorded certain lines before they recorded other ones, and yeah, they probably waited a little too long between those recording sessions. But yeah, the other thing is, you know, there's got to be like 6 or 7 instances where like Arthur falls and he makes the exact same noise. It's like, whoa, what, whoa! Yeah, it's that. They just replay that exact same voice clip every time he falls, and it's lazy and it's distracting, and yeah, it's also kind of hilarious. So yeah, this movie is filled with like a lot of distracting issues. So yeah, it's definitely not a perfect movie, but I still really enjoy it. And me personally, at least, I would give it an 8 out of 10. I think it's still enjoyable enough that, and yeah, clearly I enjoyed it a lot as a kid for a reason. So yeah. So yeah, if you're a Disney fan or anything, or you know, anything about what I'm talking about here catches your interest, definitely give this movie a watch. So yeah, anything else to add? Well, you know the drill, the comment section and all that stuff. So yeah, that's about all I have for now. So Mash it and smash it, signing off.